to the importance of combating AMR in different fronts, from the G7, G20, the German government. And so everybody has now, it has been talking for a while about AMR. I'm going to talk here really briefly about two of the topics that GARDP is trying to tackle. One is sexually transmitted diseases. There are about 78 million cases of gonorrhea each year, and some of those are now resistant to all the current therapies, and that's becoming an increasing problem. It also is a problem for reproductive health because, for example, women are normally asymptomatic, but if you are not treated, you can have ectopic pregnancies or infertility. And in the case of maternal and child health, there is about 214,000 deaths each year from neonates that die from drug-resistant infections. So these are groups of people that normally drug companies are really not interested in, and this is one of the areas we have been trying to tackle from the very beginning. We are expanding to some other things now, but I will talk about that in a second. So we are trying to address some global public health needs, and the objectives are to combat all the WHO pathogens that are in the priority list. We also have committed to deliver 4 new or improved treatments by 2023, create a pipeline for antimicrobial resistant drugs, because that's something that is lacking, especially because all the big pharmaceutical companies have left the field. And something that we really care about is appropriate use and access, because without stewardship, antibiotics get ruined really quick, and access is something that is really important, especially for low and medium income countries, whereas if you have a drug that really works, a lot of times you cannot access that drug in the places where you really need it. And as I said, we have now 4 programs. The last one to be added is called serious gram-negative bacterial infections. And the 3 programs we have been working for a little while are the sexually transmitted infections, namely this gonorrhea program, the sepsis in newborns, and also pediatric antibiotics. Because normally the way the antibiotic development goes, or in general any kind of drug development goes, is the drug gets approved for adults, and most of the times you have to wait 7 to 10 years to get an approval for pediatric indications. And so one of the things we are trying to do is to accelerate that timeline so that these drugs that are really needed for these infections get to children in a way that is, say, not off-label, so that people are using them without really knowing how they should be using them, but having all the data that is needed for proper use. I'm going to jump this one, but this is essentially saying that these sustainable development goals, especially the number 3, which is good health and well-being, are jeopardized by the by the fight we have with antimicrobial resistance. And here I'm going to talk very briefly about some of the projects. In the case of the neonatal sepsis, we have launched an observational study in 11 different countries to try to figure out what are the pathogens that are really causing neonatal sepsis. As we mentioned yesterday in the panel discussion, 3 of those sites are here in India. We are expecting to collect data from over 10,000 children in all those countries, and also have microbiological samples analyzed to be sure of what we really are fighting against. We also, as a part of this memory recovery, so-called, memory recovery for GARDP means to try to find out all drugs that have been used in the past for which there is either very little data or people doesn't really know how to use them, but that could be useful to face the crisis of antimicrobial resistance, at least for now. One of those drugs is fosfomycin. This is a really old antibiotic that was discovered in the 60s. It's not approved for IV dosing in the US, but it should be approved this year in May, probably. But it has been used in Europe, but there was really not, I mean, there is some kind of pediatric indication, but it's not developed, not based in data. So we recently completed a phase 1 of 120 neonates in Kenya to try to figure out what is the pharmacokinetics of the drug in neonates and the pharmacodynamics, and try to see if it can be dosed in a way with this antibiotic can be really used, because in a lot of cases, for example, for carbapenem resistance, Enterobacteriaceae, fosomycin will work, but some other drugs will not. And the idea is also to work with this drug in combination with something else, so that the efficacy of the drug will be maintained at least for a longer time. In the case of pediatric antibiotics, we are looking at especially also some older drugs. For example, one older drug we have been looking at is called polymyxin B. This is a cousin of colistin, and it doesn't have a pediatric indication except in the US, but not anywhere in the world. It is said, let's say, that it's less toxic than colistin. And we have been investigating for a little bit just to figure out if this could be used in children or not. This is work in progress. And again, these are kind of stopgap measures because we know that colistin resistance is increasing. But in the face of AMR, in a lot of cases, that's the only drug of choice. And in the case of sexually transmitted infections, we have done several phase 1 studies for a new drug. It's a new drug class, so there is no, it's a DNA gyrase inhibitor, but it's different than the fluoroquinolones. And this particular drug was a drug that a small biotech company in the US had. It was not going to be developed for sexually transmitted infections because it was really not, they didn't have the resources, and that's where we came in and said, well, we are going to do it. So we are going to run a phase 3 trial that is going to start in May. It's going to be in 4 different countries, in the US, in Europe, in Thailand, and in South Africa. And we hope that with this trial we can show the efficacy and the safety of that drug, which will be very important as a treatment for all those drugs, for all those infections of gonorrhea that are now becoming resistant to ceftriaxone or azithromycin, which are the treatments of choice. And lately in the press have been a lot of different cases of that type of gonorrhea, which is resistant essentially to any of the drugs. And in fact, when we try to work with a company, we try to do it in a way, we said, we are going to help you from end to end, so from the beginning to the end. A lot of funders out there, they fund a project until the drug is approved, but that's it. But we are trying to also go beyond approval. For example, phase 4 studies, so studies that you do after approval, or stewardship or access, or trying to make that drug accessible in a low and medium income countries. For example, we got from this company the rights to distribute that drug in 168 low and medium income countries, because that will be the only way to guarantee that that drug will get to the populations that really need it. And last, I'm going to talk a little bit about this antibiotic memory and recovery and exploratory program. This has 3 main components. One is Revive, which is an online space for the community. The other one is a small discovery and exploratory effort we are running. And the third one is the memory recovery and asset evaluation, which is what we are trying to do to find new drugs to help develop for enriching the pipeline. I'm going to start with Revive. Revive there is the web address of Revive. And this is an online space to connect and support antimicrobial research people. So if you are doing any project on an AMR, we have a couple of things there. For example, we facilitate learnings by having webinars. We have had so far 5 webinars. These webinars are free of charge, so anybody can register and look at the webinars. The day we webcast those webinars live, after the webinar, we have a session of questions and answers, so people can ask questions online. And also we have there about 120 experts, some people who has been working on antimicrobial development for many years that have agreed to be part of this, call it brain trust, where people that is new to the field can come and maybe ask a question or try to solve a problem or get a recommendation as to where to go for a particular service or consultancy or something like that. And this is especially important in the face of all the major pharmaceutical companies getting out of antibacterials, because a lot of the people who knew or who had a lot of expertise is getting essentially lost because there is just no programs in these companies anymore. And our way to tackle this is to try to pool those experts in a way that anybody entering the field from new could consult them and get some idea of expertise, for example. A lot of times people end up, if you are doing a project from scratch and you don't have the, call it the institutional knowledge from before, you can end up repeating mistakes that were done already 10 years ago. So this is kind of a way of people just being able to tap into that expertise. And we also have had several blogs there now, 6 blogs so far, with people from Sir Jim O'Neill, which has brought a lot about the models of antibiotic, so economic models for really making antibiotics successful, to blogs about new approvals by the FDA and so on. And we will keep doing this work. And as I said, you can join. It's totally free of charge. And we are happy to, the more, the merrier there. For example, the next 2 webinars, one is called, I don't know if this works, but you can see them in the top left. One is called Mining Chemical Libraries for New Antibacterials. That one will be on April 9. And this, at the end of this month, will be another one that is called Antibacterial Drugs, Clinical Development for Non-Developers. This will be the part 3 of a cycle, but the previous 2, you can always watch online. They are always available even before we webcast them, so anybody can access those. And then to come to the end, I'm gonna just talk a little bit about the discovery and exploratory work. Several companies had also come to us and say, hey, we have a library that has never been screened before, so if you guys want to, screen it and see if there is any compounds that have activity, especially against these very bad gram-negative pathogens. And we are doing that with Takeda and Eisai, 2 Japanese companies. We are also screening some natural products from HIPS in Germany, in Saarbrücken. We are also screening a library from the US, from Caliber. This is compounds that have gone through clinical trials, but you can maybe repurpose or mix it with a different antibiotic and see if you can get some alternative treatments there. And we already have the place where these things are going to be screened. And then last but not least, the memory recovery and asset evaluation. We have been talking for the last couple of years with over, I don't know how many companies, but at least at this point, more than 60 chemical entities that we have reviewed for the possibility of either helping them or finding the way somebody else to help them. We also have a project that we just initiated at the end of last year with the University of Verona, where we are trying to identify combinations of antibiotics to treat infections, because a lot of times in the clinic combinations are used, but a lot of times it's empiric. Nobody knows why this combination is used, or they don't have the real knowledge behind in pharmacokinetics or so on. So we are trying to do a whole review of the literature in a very rigorous way to see if we can publish a position paper helping the clinicians then to decide which combinations are really best. And at the same time, we are sending a survey to a lot of ID doctors to just see if we can get also information from them from the field. Then, again, as these recover assets, we have 2 different assets. One is a beta-lactam and the other one is a quinolone. These are all antibiotics that, in this case, were only approved in Japan. but we have seen that they could be potentially useful for two of our programs. One for the sexually transmitted program, the quinolone, and this special beta-lactam could be useful for the neonatal sepsis program because it has a lot of data for neonates and also is resistance, I mean, it's effective against most of the ESBL producing organisms. I talked already a little bit about fosfomycin and polymyxin. And then in the last year, we have been talking with 6 different companies, and this has brought us to kind of build a pipeline we have right now. We are in conversations with a lot of these companies there. Conversations are well advanced with a couple of them. In fact, one of the reasons I came a few days earlier here was because one of the companies we are working with, they have a new combination that is effective against these metal or beta-lactamases, these New Delhi NDM1s. And we wanted to talk to clinical people here to find out if there was, the feasibility of maybe in the future doing some clinical trials here. And so that means that in a relatively short amount of time, we have been able to build a pipeline. Things are moving on. We have some clinical activities going on. And GARDP is essentially thriving now. We are about 37 people. At the beginning of the year 2018, we were about 10. And we think that probably 11 additional people will be hired this year. We now became an independent foundation. We used to be part of DNDi, but since the beginning of the year, we have our own foundation. It's like the kid that became 18 and moved out of the house. And we have our own scientific advisory board, our own board of directors now. And as I mentioned, we have several things in clinical trials, one in phase 3 clinical trials, which is a first-in-class antibiotic, and 4 recovered antibiotics in different phases of development, and discussions with a lot of different biotechs. We keep working a lot together with WHO for technical advice and for all the things that has to do with access and stewardship. And we have got some funding from a lot of different governments. We have about 24% right now of the amount we think we need to raise. And most of the funding, as I said, comes from government. So one of the things that we are going to do this year, we are going to have an access workshop in this summer. There has been a lot of interest from governments, from WHO, from companies, to really understand what is how to tackle the problem of access, and this is going to happen in the summer. We are also coming up with a new business plan because we realize that what we did 3 years ago is now just totally overcome in the sense of we have grown and a lot of things are going on. And we are also trying to find what is the best way to keep raising money. We will have a pledging event on 2019. And we hope to raise some more money there for all the things we need to do to bring those very needed drugs to the pipeline. And thank you, and this is all the people who has been funding us. And if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Dr. Francis. Both of you, Dr. Irene and you, both have said to all of us that it's not only the scientific work, but reaching the unreached is most important. And your presentation has really revealed what we can do through GARDP and also DNID, where you worked earlier, and also through AMREP. You also have projected facts and figures in your presentation. I, as an educationist, always believed in the concept of 3, that is knowledge acquisition, knowledge dissemination, and the third is knowledge application. Unless and until we have all these 3 in order, all that we learn is wasted. So one need to have that, and I'm very happy that both of you have mentioned what we need to do to take to the masses, for which we are all working, the human ocean of human beings, where everybody is looking forward for such remedies for the infections or otherwise the constraints in leading a good, healthy life. I open the forum for discussion, and if you have queries, he is there. He is also one, probably along with Dr. Adrina, to open up his Pandora box for funds in case we wish to tap it. That's it.
And I'm going to disappear. Thank you so much.
If there are no questions, thank you very much, Dr. Franceschi.
Thank you, sir. Now, may I request Dr. P. Prakash to present the memento to Ms. Adriana, please. Thank you, sir. Now we are moving towards the next session, Young Scientist Talk, that will be chaired by Dr. Shailaja Singh and Dr. Jayakumar Rajadas.